Hello and welcome to MoVeConversations. This is your host Venkat. In this episode, we talk to Mr. Manish Dhawan. My co-producer Mrigank and I know Manish for many years now. He's a fellow IFTN and a veteran coffee trader and currently the Senior Vice President of Coffee Division in Olam International. We are happy to announce that we have recently started Move Conversations and Trade Stuff as a new series. In this new channel, within the Move Conversations, we talk to international traders as well as people from other professions who enable international trade in various ways. This will include IFT alumni as well as others. Manish, welcome to the show.
Hi, Venkat. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Mrigank and I have known you in Singapore for quite a few years from your early days as a coffee trader. Maybe not. So, in fact, we need to figure out like from how early was that in your coffee journey. But if, from a Singapore context, we knew you you were there for quite some time, and we have seen you happily grow in this senior position in global coffee trade. So let's begin with the start of your career journey in coffee. How did you get started in coffee business at all?
So, coffee for me, Venkat, was not. I mean, it was not a movement that was planned. I think I had joined Olam in 1998, and
Okay.
when I joined them, it was my first assignment was in cotton. So actually, I was into cotton and ginning for just under a year.
Okay.
And then there was this opportunity that came up in coffee, and this was happening. I joined them in East Africa in Tanzania,
Right.
and that's when I moved in 1999
Mm-hmm.
to coffee in the southern part of Tanzania in a place called Bea, very picturesque, which is the southern Tanzanian Arabica coffees, and that's how I started. And ever since I've been in coffee.
So what have been the different roles in coffee trade that you have taken up over the years?
So I think I have been very lucky in that regard because one, of course, the length of time that I've spent in coffee, and given the kind of opportunities that I've got within Olam. So I
Right.
played a whole host of roles. So I started out, of course, being a supply chain manager, handling the origination and procurement of coffee and other commodities initially.
Mm-hmm.
Then looked at origin profit center head for coffee, which is managing the book and the trading for
Mm-hmm.
from a particular country.
Mm-hmm.
I've been country manager for the Vietnam business for a while. Handled of obviously when I moved to Singapore. That's when I moved to Singapore after my stint in Vietnam. That was
Mm-hmm.
in 2006,
Oh, yeah.
and that's when I started handling more the sales and marketing for the Asia, Middle East, and Southern Europe, based out of Singapore. And
Right.
then I've looked at now for the last 10 odd years more regional oversight roles for Asia and the Africa P&Ls, the oversight of the specialty coffee business for a while.
Wonderful.
Obviously, leading we have a small within the coffee business own coffee estate plantations business. So I'm still heading that business. So yeah, quite a lot of
Wonderful. Quite a
roles.
lot of roles. So wonderful. So, you're the right guy for our audience to understand, what goes on in for in the cup that they drink. In the context of Tanzania, I heard you mention Arabica. So, what are the major types of coffee that are traded? We often hear about Arabica and Robusta. Something else? And
Yeah, so basically, coffee among the major ones that are commercially traded and consumed, I think there are perhaps two that are more well known, which is Arabica and Robusta, which is predominantly 99%, maybe slightly more than that, of the overall coffee that we consume.
mm-hmm.
But there are maybe a couple of others like Liberica and Excelsa that are also still traded or grown in some countries. But
But
apart
we
from
don't.
that, there are maybe tens, if not hundreds, of other species of coffee, but those are not of commercial interest or have not been so far.
So, what's the difference between Arabica and Robusta?
So basically, there are two different species, if you want to call it, within the coffee space. And Arabica is the one that typically grows in higher elevations.
Mm-hmm.
and provides more the flavor and the aroma and the acidity in our cup of coffee. Whereas
Okay.
and it has slightly lower caffeine levels than the other variety, which is Robusta, which is normally robust, as the name suggests. It's easier to grow relative to Arabica, less pressed in disease pressure. It grows at lower elevations. And also it is more stronger in the sense that it provides more the body
Body.
and the the bitterness, what we call, to our cup of coffee, and has a higher caffeine kick. So most of the coffee that we drink really are blends. Apart from certain markets or certain SKUs, most coffees that we drink would be in a blend of Arabica and Robusta to get the right balance out.
Right. So when we talk about Robusta, what we can kind of remember is that it has got higher caffeine content. It gives body,
Yeah.
and it is robust as a plant itself. It's more bitter, right? So those are
Yeah.
the essential things. So literally, this is the robust coffee, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So talking about the coffee crop and the growing, and since if you would allow me to say that you started your career probably in the bushes, if it's an acceptable way of describing the start of your career. I read that that last year was an, so quote unquote, on year of the biennial production cycle. So can you explain to us, what is this cycle? What is an on year? What is an off year for coffee business?
See, basically, coffee as a plant
Mm-hmm.
is has this cyclicality that it follows every good crop with a slightly poorer crop, and
Okay.
vice versa. And the reason for that is because the coffee plant is it's perennial, and uh, it always carries or works on two crops at a time. So what I mean is that you have the stem and you have branches, right? And branches are where you will have leaves, which will eventually there will be buds and flower formation and fruit development.
Mm-hmm.
So the tree in coffee always works on the branch with the idea of two crops in mind. One crop, which is where the fruiting is happening,
Mm-hmm.
and the other part, which is the branch extension beyond that, which will be your potential for the next crop,
Oh, okay.
right? And one trivia very interesting for non-coffee guys is that the coffee tree on any branch, or any whether it's a primary branch or a secondary or a tertiary, in any part of that branch, once you have fruited once, it never fruits again at the same place in the life of the tree.
Oh, okay.
So as you kind of keep the tree becoming older, it's only the new branch growth extension that are the source of new crop. The the area where you have had crop earlier can only have leaves. It will never have fruits anymore. So
Oh,
yeah, so that's
okay.
one part. So what happens is that, given this working on two crop cycle, it is natural that let's say this year we've had a lot of good flowering and good fruit potential in the area that is for this year.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm.
So the plant automatically realizes that there is a need to channel more of nutritional requirements into this part of the crop to protect the progeny and the fruit.
Oh, okay.
So therefore, there is less energy diverted towards the extension of the branch for next crop. So therefore, the area or the potential for next crop is smaller. So after this good crop, you will have a smaller crop. And what happens the next year is the opposite, where it will say that lesser energy is required to protect the fruits of this crop, and therefore you will put more energy towards branch extension for the next crop. So it kind of works on that. And I
Okay.
think this is more exaggerated in very intensively managed conditions. And
Okay.
given that Brazil is the largest producer by far,
Mm.
and this biannuality is extremely exaggerated in Brazil,
Oh,
it is essentially the Brazil on year and off year that determines coffee on year
on
and
year and
off year.
off year. Oh, okay. So yeah, I think since you just brought up Brazil, maybe it's a right place for me to ask this. Give us an overview of what are the major nations, where coffee is grown, who are the major exporters, who are the major importers, as countries.
In terms of coffee producing countries, I think it's a situation that has got extremely polarized over the last 20, 30 years. Obviously, it's always been dominated by a few countries, but Today, I think the largest producer by far is Brazil, which accounts for somewhere between 30 and 35% of global production.
Okay.
And followed by Vietnam, which is, whenever I talk to somebody who's, not from the coffee trade, this one comes as a big surprise, because when you say, which are the largest producing countries, and you say the second largest producer globally and the first in Robusta is Vietnam, and a lot of people say, oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
So Vietnam is the second, and then you have I would say the next five, which is Colombia, which is at number 3, and then you have Indonesia, which is at number 4,
Okay.
and then you have, let's say, Ethiopia, Honduras, and India
Hmm.
at the next 2, 3. So these are the top 5, 6 countries on the production side.
Okay.
Of course, they are all different, because Brazil, in this list that I gave you, Brazil is probably the one that has a very good mix between Arabica and Robusta. Vietnam is almost entirely, let's say 90%, slightly more than that, of Robusta. So it
Right.
is the biggest Robusta producer. Indonesia is also largely Robusta, a bit of Arabica, which is more the high quality specialty stuff. And the others are primarily single countries. So Ethiopia is only Arabica, Honduras is only Arabica. So yeah.
Right. And
Colombia, only
Colombia
Arabica.
or
Only
only
Arabica.
Arabica? Yeah, all high end ones. So, does the list of exporter nation also follows the similar list that you mentioned, right?
It does, because the size of the Brazil crop is just so much that even though Brazil
dominates.
as a country consumes, so Brazil actually is also a top 5 individual country as a consumer of coffee.
Right.
But even despite that, I think they have enough to export. So they are the largest shipper globally, and so it follows that same list. So it would be Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, Indonesia, Ethiopia in that, or maybe Ethiopia would be a little lower on the exporting list because they also consume more. So maybe Honduras will be a larger exporter than Ethiopia because they don't have local consumption, but
Right.
that would be the list.
Right. In terms of consumers, USA number 1. What is it? So is that correct? Is my guess right?
Yeah, so I think in terms of consuming countries, as a single country or as a bloc, of course, Europe is the
Yeah.
largest. They would account for, let's say, 30% of overall consumption. But in terms of single countries, the US is the largest. And then you would be, followed by, if we include local consumption, then producing country, then Brazil would be quite large. And then you'll have Germany, Italy, Japan would be large consumers of coffee. Yeah. But as a bloc, I think the
EU.
Europe would be one large cluster, and then North America, so US, Canada would be another large cluster, and then you would drop followed by in Asia, Japan is a large consumer. Italy is large within the EU. So these are some of the large countries.
Right. And the EU would be importers too, right? Primarily.
Importers,
They would be the
yes.
biggest importers. So from farm to cup, what are the major steps in the coffee business?
So I think in terms of farm to cup, the way it works is that coffee is harvested by the producer, and then depending on how the after harvest, post harvest processing takes place. So there are typically, when we look at coffee, one way to separate it is the Robusta and Arabica, which is what you mentioned earlier. The other way to, or what trade does, is basically that it splits up the Arabicas into naturals and washed.
Okay.
And so therefore there are 3 categories. So there is Arabica naturals, there is Arabica washed, and there is Robusta. So that's how trade look at it. And also roasters, when they look at blend preparations and blend mixes, that's how they look at it. So what's the difference between the washed and the natural is that when the coffee fruit is harvested from the tree, you can either go in for drying that fruit on a patio, and or a drying bed or something, and then it becomes dried, and then you hull off or remove the dried skin and get the seed, which is what we are interested in, right? The other way is that when the fruit is fresh, so it looks, coffee fruit looks like a ripe cherry. That's why
Right.
it's called a coffee cherry.
Right.
And so the coffee cherry is taken, and the fresh, the flesh, the fruit part is removed while it is fresh,
Right.
and that needs water to remove, and it then gives you in the seed. But like, if you've had a what should I say, if you have a cherry, or if
Mm.
you've tried a plum, when you eat the fresh fruit, the seed is not clean.
Yep.
It has
Yep.
quite a lot of sugar and
Correct.
some fleshy parts stuck onto that.
Fiber too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fiber. So then you either use some kind of a mechanical abrasion machine to clean that off, or traditionally it is submerged or put under fermentation in tanks to loosen that skin layer. So next day morning or whatever, after 12 to 18 hours, you would those sugars would have got degraded by the bacteria, and therefore you can then have a clean bean, and you dry it and you get the seed. So the first one is pure: take the fruit, dry it, hull it, or remove the skin, and you get beans, and then which is ready for dry processing. And the second one is washing. So there are two different methods. Obviously there are pros and cons, but the wash method gives you a more cleaner cup profile, because you don't have any of the earthy flavors associated with drying directly as a fruit, but and more acidity. But the other one has more fruit and more earth and more complex flavors as well. So these are three categories. Once the coffee is processed, it is then obviously it moves through the supply chain. So it goes in through various intermediaries depending on the supply chain infrastructure of various origins, and then reaches the warehouse or the dry milling station
Mm-hmm.
of exporters,
Mm-hmm.
where it is cleaned, sorted, size graded, color sorted. So all of that, just to make sure that that raw material that you get is sized into different screens with different defect percentages as per tolerances, and then it is exported.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course it is used by roasters to roast,
Mm-hmm.
and then use that roasted bean to blend it with
Mm-hmm.
different combinations, because a roaster is like a master chef. So
Yeah.
for all their different variants of coffee SKUs that they carry, and for different markets they cater to, they will have different blends, and they decide that blend, and that's proprietary. So they buy from the trade or from origin exporters only single origin straight coffee grades, and then at their end they decide what to blend and how much to blend, and then they roast it. And of course the the consumption of that coffee eventually depends on the format. So if it is a straight roasting ground drip, or a powder that we buy, then that's that. If it is to be into a single use format like a capsule or a pod or something, then it gets used up as a roasting ground powder into that capsule.
Mm.
If it is for the instant coffee soluble industry, then it goes to another step, where from the roasted powder it gets into an extraction in and a evaporation or a drying mode, to
Right.
get you the 100% or 99.99% soluble coffee powder, which is what we all love in various formats. So yeah, so that's how broadly it moves.
Right. Thank you for joining us in yet another episode of Move Conversations. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the Move Conversations YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get notifications of new episodes. Thank you very much. Till I see you in the next episode. Thank you very much. Have a great day.